So, folks, there's been public debate about naming the accused in cases involving minors, but at what cost to the child? With us now are Darrell Scott, Policy Committee member from Free Children Foundation, and their consultant and attorney at law, Kayla Wright, to discuss protecting children and responsible reporting. We did ask you guys what you thought, and we want to share some of what you said before we start the discussion. Good morning to you both.
Good morning.
Welcome to Smile Jamaica. So let's go with the first one says, that's the question we just asked. In case involving child victims, should the accused be named, or should the child's safety and privacy always come first? And you said, protect the child at all costs. That was the first one we got. Well, this one, once there is evidence that it is a truth, silence and not naming criminals give them anonymity to continue to victimize unsuspecting children and people. People should be aware of who these people are so they can stay away from them. Children who are abused have nothing to be ashamed of. It's the criminals who should be afraid. It's them who should live in shame. The victims who speak up are heroes. They save themselves and other potential victims. They should get a medal on Heroes Day. Yeah. Next one, they don't seem mutually exclusive, but the child's safety and privacy first, Kimani says. Think that's it? I think that's it. Good morning once again.
Good morning.
Darrell, let me start with you. What are your thoughts on what should happen?
So I do generally agree with what is being said. The best interest of the child should go first. But we also understand that these publications are a matter of accountability and making sure that the persons who are harming people don't continue to harm people.
So, Madam Lawyer, how do we know if we don't know who the person is? So, I am the bad guy here, but you don't name me. How people going to know, say, stay away from the Neville Bell because he is not a good person, if you don't name me?
So I think it comes in stages because, we have to think about the fact that you have to be charged and then convicted. But before the conviction happens, we have to treat the cases with caution and a type of sensitivity because we're dealing with children, and children are some of the most vulnerable members of our society. So we have to put, as Darrell said, their best interest first, because when children go through an ordeal like this, and they have it in the public sphere like this, they face re-traumatization and stigma and harassment and victim blaming and so on, which, as one of the comments said, isn't fair to them. They shouldn't feel bad for coming forward, but it's a reality, and we don't want to kind of prolong that type of long-term psychological issue.
Yeah. Just before Delia, but eventually you're not going to know is who, because when I go to court, unless it's some secret case, you're going to know says me eventually, and then you're going to know says Delia had the trouble eventually, no?
So, yes, that can happen, especially because Jamaica is very small. But again, we're just thinking about protecting children throughout the process itself. And then there is a sexual offenders registry, which isn't public right now, but their names are in it. The conviction is there as well. But just as long as possible and as best as possible, we just want to protect the children.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think part of the problem is really, as you said, the reality of it. Because a lot of people are commenting, when they know Jamaican people, sometimes there's a saying, when I'm not limited, and so we will see a child and say, they're not the picnic that was so-and-so. And so it is important to do that. But to follow up on what Neville has said, you mentioned the sex offender registry, but are there other ways that we can protect our children? I was asking, is it a case where when you come out, you're not allowed to go within a certain distance of areas where children are? You're not allowed to do certain jobs. Have we reached that far yet?
So I think it depends on the offense and the orders that the judge gives. But in the interim, there are actually restrictions around reporting and so on, and publications regarding children throughout the case. So not showing their faces or posting their names or their schools or anything that can be linked to that child, those are in place in the Child Care and Protection Act and, of course, the Sexual Offences Act.
Yeah, but in terms of the offender outside of the registry, are there other things that will protect a child. So I'll say, all right, I don't have to say a child's name.
Yeah.
Because I think the argument now is people are saying, I want to know who it is so I can protect the child. But is there a way that I can protect the child legally without having to go into names? So I know it's John Brown. But when John Brown comes out of prison, John Brown cannot get a job as a teacher. John Brown cannot get a job that puts him in proximity of schools. John Brown is supposed to drive taxi. Do we have those things in Jamaica? Not yet.
With teeth, I wouldn't say we do. But of course, background checks happen, police records when you have to apply for somewhere or go to a job, those things happen. So those things are in place for sure. But when it comes to really enforcing certain laws, we can have more teeth.
Yeah.
Okay.
Daryl and Kaylee, I don't know if you guys are authors of this, but it says Free Children Foundation is concerned that inconsistent media practices have contributed to a growing perception that victims or those connected to them must be publicly identified. I don't know if you guys are the authors of that, but what, if you are, and even if you are not, it came from your group, what do you mean by inconsistent media practices?
So we see the reporting when you report a case of abuse, it's a bit inconsistent with how the standards that they report. So whether they're naming children, whether they're giving details about where it happened and the amount of details that they give, that is inconsistent. And we see with the most recent case, comments are like, media houses do this all the time. Why is it different? Why is these details not being said? Is it because it's a form of PM? So we have to see that because of these inconsistencies, the perception is that some children are protected and some are not. There is some people who get this level of privacy and there are some who don't. We see also cases where, especially young girls, are victims of abuse. Those headlines that come out are a bit sensationalized. And because the standard is not across the board, these questions come into concern.
I suspect you're not talking about one media house, I suspect.
No.
All right. So maybe we would say something and another media house say something else.
Yeah, so
where is the inconsistency part? Is that I still don't understand that.
So it's case by case. So different cases
Okay.
don't have the same standards. And I can say what's happening on the back end, why that happened, but I think our recommendation is just to publish certain images about the child, certain details, making sure that the standard is maintained. So there can be no question about the justness in how you report.
I want to get back to teeth then, because teeth will mean if there are policies and laws that say you cannot, if you do it, then there's a problem. So how does teeth come in now with social media? Because you will have the media houses saying, okay, we cannot publish a name, and then a social media page will say, it's all right, them can't do it, but me I gotta do it, and see the picture of the person here, which just negates the whole thing.
Yeah.
How do we police across the board?
So this is actually an area that does have teeth because Jamaican law is actually very clear on restrictions around that. As I said earlier, the Child Care and Protection Act, Section 7, it talks about when cases like this that do involve children come to the fore, their best interest is paramount, and that means that preserving their anonymity is paramount as well. So as Daryl was saying, no name, no addresses, no saying that a child from this school in this grade, because Jamaica's small and we'll be able to piece together quickly. And there are, if you breach this, there's an offense, not just for media houses, but for individuals, a fine up to 500 grand, imprisonment up to 6 months or both. And also the Sexual Offences Act has anonymity for complainants as well.
Yeah, I think part of the challenge with how people see the consistency is if I say John Brown is accused of assaulting a 15-year-old, it could be any 15-year-old. But if I say John Brown is accused of assaulting his 15-year-old, then that narrows it to the identity of the child. And I feel that's where people are not understanding that the media can say a name in some instances, but in some we can't.
And because this case, and I suspect you can't speak about this case specifically because it's in the court, but they did say incest.
Incest,
so,
exactly.
So
So
if
it
you
narrows it
never
down.
You're going
Correct.
to say somebody in my family.
Correct.
So how you get around that though? Because him going still go to court, don't? And people still want to see him there. How you get around that, Kayla?
So that's why we want to, before it even gets to the court, stress the importance of protecting that child's name and identity. Because again, as you said, this case is about incest, and this is why this conversation is even happening, because it becomes so easy to narrow it down. So when yes, he's going to go to court, and I think people are going to know because Jamaica is small, but just as best as possible, we can protect it. We should at least try.
Yeah. I want to reinforce as we have this conversation that a lot of times, victims will hear conversations like these and feel like, oh my gosh, everybody's talking about me and maybe I shouldn't. But I want to reinforce to them that the reason we're having the conversation in the first place is because we support them.
Yes.
And because we want you to feel and know that you are not in any way guilty of what has happened to you.
Yeah.
And that we are just basically trying to find ways to support you.
Yes.
I just wanted to reinforce.
And the other thing, finally, is that no one has been convicted of anything yet. So last time I checked, you're innocent until proven guilty. So let's not jump the gun here. But let's see. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you for having us.
Well explained. Daryl Scott, Policy Committee member for Free with Children Foundation and consultant, Free with Children Foundation, and attorney at law, Kayla Wright.
After the break, we're discussing the National Reconstruction and Resilience Authority Bill 2026.